Yes, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Also for the connection that was made through the consulate. And indeed, I hope that this is not just a one-time visit, but that we can mark this after the start of a very fruitful collaboration with all of you. So I'm looking also forward to meet you, maybe during the breaks. Maybe I can feed you a little bit with some and then we can discuss them also in the panel, I think. So, my name is Sjaak Wolfert, and I'm working at Wageningen University in research as a strategic senior scientist. And I'm mainly involved in, of my mission, my personal mission is how can we apply information and communication technologies to agriculture and food. That's basically what I'm doing through all kind of projects. And I will tell you a little bit about that. So if you want to know more, then we can also discuss that further. So maybe, who don't know Wageningen, Wageningen University and Research are actually two partners. So you have the university and Wageningen Research. And here you see our campus. It's flat, as you probably imagine. But it's still relatively new. I think it started 10 or 15 years ago. Before that, I was studying in Wageningen, and I had to go on my bike to all the different locations, a lecture here and a lecture there, and it was all spread over the city. And now we have a very beautiful campus where everything is concentrated. And that resulted also in a race of students. But we are also very much international university, so you see over 125 countries are somehow represented. And as I said, we are Wageningen University and Research, and the idea is also that we can supply knowledge to the whole range of academic research until applied research. And personally, and also my colleague Frits that will speak afterwards, we are both from Wageningen Research, which means that basically we are more involved into applied research. But the idea is also that if we need at some moment some more fundamental research, we can easily make the connection. And we have also the connection with the students that are working in our innovation projects, for example. We are still in the celebration year. I think in a couple of weeks we have the Dies Natalis, the birth of our university. That was 100 years ago. So last year we had quite some celebrations. It has stopped now, but we had a fantastic year, I think. And I also would like to mention that this is the best university in the Netherlands, and not only this year, but already for 14th times. And it is elected by students. So the students indicate that this is the best university. So we are very proud of that. And just to continue a little bit, if you have this world ranking of agricultural universities or the world ranking of universities, and if you look at agricultural science, we're also there already for many years in the top 3, and recently it was #1, and I think it shifts a little bit between other universities well known. We are very proud of that. And this is our mission statement. So our mission is to explore the potential of nature to improve the quality of life. So it's clearly, we come from let's say, a pure agricultural university, but we are now looking more into the whole supply chain, but also the whole environment, how to produce in a sustainable way. It's one of our core objectives we also have. Okay, some background about that. Before I want to go into my presentation, I refer to Professor Johan Bauma, which is one of my old professors. He was a soil scientist, and he's still active. He's already retired, but he was also one of the founding fathers of precision agriculture, as we call it now. And recently he gave another interview, so he's still, like me, sometimes giving speeches and keynotes at conferences. And for a long time he's not yet a solo or a monodisciplinary person looking at soils. He says, if you want to achieve the UN sustainability goals, you can't achieve that through individual disciplines. So you need a multidisciplinary approach. And he also says that it is really important to get the stakeholders all involved in the entire process. So we need a collaborative process. And finally, he says something, yeah, there are no direct solutions. Also, I'm going to talk a lot about technology. Technology doesn't solve the problem at once, and maybe also not only. So this is the core of all our projects, where we are working in trials or use cases where knowledge and app development takes place through this lean multi-actor approach. And as I will show several examples, these can be at a very regional level, so in some area in the Netherlands or in France or in Spain. But then there's also the risk, of course, that you are just doing things over there and you miss a whole lot of other knowledge and competences that you need. So therefore we usually embed it into several other blocks of disciplines. So on the one hand, the technology, data science and information management is very important. And at the other side, more the organizational aspects. And I will emphasize that also throughout my presentation. If you talk about innovation, and especially digital innovation or digital transformation, you need to do both developments hand in hand, so technology and organization. And then, as I said, sometimes this is just a small group of people working on a certain experiment, a use case, or whatever you call it, a pilot. You also want to scale it up, so therefore it's necessary that you have also ecosystem development, so that you include more and more players and developing the whole ecosystem. So this is the basis. So in that way we try to create a whole ecosystem and collaboration space of digital innovation, and in my case in agriculture. This model can also be applied to many other sectors, of course, but I'm involved in agriculture and food. And we are also usually having this role, so the whole also has to be coordinated and managed, and we are usually also doing that from Wageningen University in research. So maybe this is still kind of abstract picture for you at the moment, so I will give you several examples, and I hope then it will be explained in a better way. So if we talk about smart farming, I always emphasize this management cycle. This is the regular management cycle, and it doesn't matter in which sector you are, in dairy or vegetables or fruits. You are measuring something, you do analysis on top of that, you make a planning out of that, and then you control your processes, and you evaluate it again using all kind of monitoring systems. And what we see nowadays, that these steps in this management cycle are becoming more smart. And I think Fritz in the next presentation will show many more examples of that. But you see, for sensing and monitoring, you can have some smart device in your greenhouse, or use drones or satellite data from the field. For the analysis, there are advanced computer programs, algorithms, maybe artificial intelligence nowadays, to do the analysis and make a planning out of that. And then, you have also your control, and you see some example of a milking robot over here. I think we're going to hear more about that also this afternoon. But also you can think about autonomous tractors and that kind of things. And the idea is that you can close this whole loop. Because in the past, when we were starting with what we call precision agriculture, there was a lot of emphasis over here. So we made these nice pictures of the field that we could see differences between yields from a small spot to another spot, so there was variation. But there was still, and I think there is still, quite a large challenge over here, how to analyze these data, what does it mean, but then also, are you able to control it? And so I always say you can maybe measure everything on a square centimeter, but if you don't have the equipment to operate also at a square centimeter, then, well, it's useless. You cannot close the cycle. And I think here is also one of the big bottlenecks, because while this equipment or a drone, it doesn't cost so much. That's relatively cheap. But especially the equipment over here, if you want to have advanced spraying machines or advanced milking robots, these are really very expensive. So then farmers are hesitating to invest in this. And what I also want to emphasize in this cycle is that nowadays yeah, all these smart devices are producing a lot of data, and actually they also need to perform. So big data is coming up. But we don't look only at farming, because from smart farming you go to the consumer, and I think that was also explained in the first presentation. And then there are also new opportunities. If you use this technology at the farm, you gather a lot of detailed information about how your crop or your animal is growing, what inputs are used, what was the weather or the climate around it. So you can use this information to communicate it with consumers. But then you need also smart logistics, especially smart tracking and tracing systems, so that you really know where, well, this tomato over here, where did it come from, how was it treated, how was it grown. And that's still maybe relatively easy said, but in practice this is also still quite a challenge to do that. It really requires smart tracking and tracing. But it creates also new opportunities. So as I pictured here, there are certain consumer trends that are happening. And if you're able, because the arrow is going two ways, if you're able to identify what are the consumer trends, and maybe you can connect with a certain consumer group as a producer or even as a farmer, then it also creates more market opportunities. So that's also an important development. And if you are not just looking at food, there is also the trend of making food more personalized, and then you can connect it with your health status. And so there are even companies nowadays that can make a DNA scan of you, what are your genetics, and then they can make some recommendations what type of food you should eat. And then you, of course, you have to know the properties, the information about the food. So then everything comes together. And again, here I say there are a lot of new market opportunities for which the primary sector, especially the farming sector or the agricultural sector, is looking for. Because we were used in the past to produce a lot of bulk products, soybeans, cotton, milk. But if you can differentiate that to certain personalized consumers, then you get a much higher added value, so it creates also more opportunities. But okay, it requires also some rethinking. So this is happening, as I explained, supported by all kind of new technology like big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, etc. And it's used for control, decision making in the whole supply chain from the farm to the consumer level, but it's also used for food integrity. So that you know how your food is produced through the whole supply chain. But I think we also see now that also from public decision making, they're also tapping into this system. So they use also the same data to monitor climate change or food safety or other environmental issues. So they are trying to, because in the past, and also my institute is and was involved in that, they were using separate statistics for that. So it was a kind of separate channel of measuring information. But now they also look at the agricultural sector. How can they use also the same data that were used for monitoring the fields? So you see now that this public decision making and corporate decision making around the same data is coming together. And also we as researchers, it's even not in this picture, we are also looking at that. So as you know, in the past, or still we do that, you are collecting your own information as a researcher, you do analysis on it and you publish it in a paper or maybe some PhD thesis, and that's the knowledge that we produce. But I think there is in the future, in the near future and even now, much more need for real-time application of knowledge, so that you really connect the knowledge production and knowledge development with real-time data coming from all these processes over here. So you see data is becoming more important, and therefore people are talking about data as the new oil or the new gold. But that also results in what I call the battlefield of data for farming and food. So you see a lot of dynamics around these data, and what is happening is that the big machinery companies are looking at the data of the farmer, and they build their own platforms trying to collect all these data of the farms because they expect, because it's still, like we know from the other examples, from the Facebooks and the Googles, usually in the beginning, it's just an expectation that you can earn a lot of money or added value with data. But they are already trying to do it. So are the input suppliers like Monsanto or BASF or Bayer, and now took over Monsanto. They're doing the same things. And also, if you look at the processors and the retailers, of course, they are also doing that for a long time, especially in getting the data from you as consumer. But increasingly, they are also looking for how can we connect it with the farm data so that we can have even a better market position. But okay, so this is already a kind of a battle going on around the farm and the consumer on the data through all these names. And I just have a few examples, of course, there are many more. But these are, let's say, the traditional players. What is also happening is that there are startups, we call them tech startups, that are backed up by these names that you probably know. The big tech providers, IBM and Google and Amazon, they are also entering this market. So they are competing with the traditional players. And from the other side, I can also show that there are also other startups that are not backed up by large companies, but by large capital funds. So I don't go into detail, but for example, Farmers Business Network is a nice example that already became very big. It was not a startup anymore. That was backed up by Google. Farm Mobile is a typical example that sells data from farmers and tries to make investments with that on the market. And then if they are successful, the farmer gets a certain share. That was started also as a startup, backed up by venture capitalists. So yeah, this is happening now, and yeah, I think there's a whole battle going on around the data of the farm and the consumer. And this means also that in the end it is not about technology anymore. I think one of my main messages is also, and that was also the organizational part in my approach, is that governance issues. So how do you organize your data chain or supply chain around it, and what is the business model? So data is becoming valuable, and how do you share the added value in a fair way, so that not one monopolist is getting away with all the money. And actually, I think that's also necessary, because usually there were these big names on these previous slides, but they also recognize that they cannot do it on their own. They only have, for example, a lot of data about their machine that is operating at the farm, but they don't have the data from other parts of the system. So yeah, they have to collaborate with each other, and then you also have to, you need to have a good business model behind that. And so all kind of questions are popping up, especially from farmers. Do I still own my data? Can I transfer my data easily? Isn't there a lock-in situation? And that kind of questions. And that's already going on for some time, and therefore there were several initiatives to write kind of guidelines for farmers or other actors around the farm. Like Copa-Cogeca is the cooperative of cooperatives in Europe, of the farmers and the agri-cooperatives. But also this one is coming from New Zealand, and this is from the US. And they are basically doing the same things. They're trying to give to raise awareness amongst farmers, especially in this case, about that you don't share your data with everybody, and if you have to do it, that they provide some guidelines on how to do it, also some examples of contracts that you can use. So this is going on, and it's a very important issue. And as I said, if you look at the issues, I put governance, business model on top. Of course, it's also about infrastructure. If you want to share information and data, you also need to have an infrastructure. But it's again also related. So all the different issues are somehow related with each other, because yeah, you need the infrastructure. And I think if you have a more open infrastructure, well, it's logical, then it's easier to share it in an open way. But if you have a very closed infrastructure, that usually goes along with proprietary models, proprietary business models along with it. And it's also important, another issue is to create this ecosystem. That was this lower block in my picture. This ecosystem development is also very important because I will come back to that in the end of my presentations. We started a new project, Smart Agri Hubs, where we started with the situation that we said, okay, all these different developments on technology, on digital innovation is still very scattered. There are some large players active, but even these large players are not able to create a viable ecosystem. So, yeah, we also have to focus on that. So I don't go into detail, but yeah, we are working on these issues through several European projects, and usually they are public-private partnerships. So we get public money usually, and then we have to make a partnership with private partners. So they get also 50% or 75% funded, then in this case from the European Commission, but they also have to bring in their own money. So we started in 2011 with Smart Agri-Food, with FiSpace, and it ended in what is called FiWare, which is an open library of software components for the future internet. Yeah, it's a lot about technology. We had 3 accelerator projects on agri-food, where we involved more than 150 or 125 startups that have to build applications based on FiWare and also the things we developed over here. And then a new program from the European Union started on the Internet of Things. They wanted to have a large-scale uptake of Internet of Things. And at that time, DG Agri was also very much involved, and they said, okay, we also need to have a large-scale pilot on the Internet of Things. And that resulted into the Internet of Food and Farm, which is one of our flagship projects at the moment, where we are working on IoT, and I will tell more about that in a moment. And recently, as you can see, in 2018, we started the Smart Agri Hubs project, and they are really connected with each other. But these are our current projects I will talk about. So first of all, the Internet of Food and Farm, 2020. It's, as I said, a large-scale innovation action for 4 years. We get in total 30 million euros of funding from DG Connect and DG Agri from the European Commission. And the objective is to have a large-scale uptake of Internet of Things in the European farming and food sector. Because I also want to be clear that maybe you think you will still have a lot of work to do here in Turkey on technology uptake, but it's also still, I think, worldwide, but also in Europe, still the case that the adoption of this technology is still running behind. And so that's the main goal of this project, to have this large-scale uptake. And as you can see, we put first our sub-objective. Our first sub-objective is also again on this business case. If you don't have a clear business case, then farmers will not adopt it, and also technology providers will not be interested in it. So that's really very important. But we will also look at how can we integrate and reuse technologies in a very efficient way, so that we don't have all kind of isolated technology systems that are not communicating with each other. User acceptability is then also very much important, and how can we sustain these solutions. And so here you see some picture, what is Internet of Things about. Maybe, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the idea is that all these objects you see over here are becoming things in the internet, and they are connecting with each other. Also through this management cycle, I pictured in the beginning, but the idea is in the past there was some sensoring equipment, something, and they send data to some computer in an office, and somebody is going to do something with it and then translated it to maybe the tractor over here. The whole idea of Internet of Things is, of course, that there is a direct communication between all these things, and that this whole process is becoming more and more autonomous, that it's driving itself. And this is a very new map. You can find it at our website, iof2020.eu. It's an interactive map, so you see several different sectors we are working in. So you can also filter it. We are also focusing on organic and non-organic. And you can click on one of these dots over here if you visit this website. And these are all the locations of the experiments or use cases that we are doing. A year ago, there were still quite some white spots, especially here in the East. So therefore, we had an open call for new use cases, and I will also show them in a moment. And now, as you can see, we virtually cover the whole Europe. And, well, there's a big white spot over here, so maybe we have to do something about that. So, in a moment, I will have to discuss a few use cases more in detail, but I will just show you the whole. So this is the Internet of Arable Farming, where we are focusing on different crops. These are the new use cases that came out of the open call. Yeah, they are focusing on things like precision agriculture, but also traceability of food, farm-machine interoperability. So it's a whole diverse set of use cases. This is the Internet of Dairy Farming, also two new use cases. So they are especially also looking at monitoring of the cows, where they are, also within the stable, but also monitoring their health and their fertility status especially. I will have an example in more detail in a moment. The Internet of Fruit, focusing on grapes, olives, and also other fruits, more on the fruit logistics, and also two new use cases are added over here. And the Internet of Vegetables, this one is even looking at city farming. So it's, for example, the case with Philips as a technology provider, and I have a kind of vertical farm where they are looking at these leafy vegetables. But we're also looking at very advanced weeding that is taking place in the data it produces and how can it be reused. And finally, we have the Internet of Meat, focusing on pig and poultry, but also, so this is more at the farm, and meat transparency and traceability is more in the whole supply chain. And there are also three use cases added. So I will very briefly highlight a few use cases. So this is the one within field management zoning, so it's a typical precision agricultural use case. What I want to highlight already here is that here you see the consortium of partners that is working on that. So you see some maybe familiar names. Bayer is involved. Here are some machine manufacturers, Veneland and Grimme. This is the Farmers Association. This is us. And here you see KPN, which is our Dutch telecom provider. And then here from the Borne Aardappelen is the actual farmer. It's a big farmer. It's a very advanced farmer, I must say, that is involved. Yeah, just a small anecdote. Last week it was in the news that he was also experimenting a lot with drones. And you know there is a lot of legislation around drones that you cannot just fly a drone everywhere, and especially if you want to use heavier drones, you are really running into your limits. And what he did is that he opened his own airport just to bypass all the regulation. So now there is somewhere in the middle of nowhere, there's a new airport. Of course, you cannot fly there, but he can now fly with his own drones as he likes. But what I want to emphasize is that it's very important that you cover the whole IoT value chain, as we call it, from technology providers, infrastructure providers, end users, and some communication partners and research partners in between. So they are together in this multi-actor approach working on this experiment. And these are just some product impressions on what they're doing. And so they use this scanner to scan the soil, which delivers these soil maps. Then they use AcroWeb, and Frits will tell more about AcroWeb in his presentation. And so it's a series of apps that they can use to produce this variable rate application for fertilizers or chemicals that you want to spray. So it's based on the soil map. And then you see here in the end, you have your machines that implement the product, the map that was generated over here and actually over here. So that's the technology. I don't go into the details of this slide, but what I want to show here is that we also support this use case in their business development. So they have to define clear KPIs, key performance indicators on yield improvement, quality improvement, reduction of pesticide use, because we are publicly funded the governments are also very much looking at that, not only productivity increase, but also sustainability is very important. And you see here some part that indicates that they also think about their business model. So all this technology that you saw at the previous slide, at what price do we have to sell it to the farmer? And what is then the return on an investment of the farmer? So every use case is also supported in that, or they are working on that. This is another one, a big wine optimization. So it's on wine and the Bordeaux. Here you see also the actors, but I put them also here on the new slide. So domaine, the Denis de Boudieu domain is a typical French wine grower. We visited that, which was a very pleasant meeting, I must say. But he's the end user. On the other hand, we have ST Microelectronics, which is a very big microelectronic producer, and they are delivering several technologies, some chips and advanced computers to measure all kinds of things. And then you see a lot of actors also in between to do the processing of the data, to do the analysis. This is more a kind of association of wine growers, and this is also kind of technology institute in France, also quite big. So again, to indicate covering the whole IoT value chain, and they are working together in this multi-actor approach on this solution. And this is again a kind of impression. So here you see the vineyard where they are implementing all kinds of sensors also in the soil, developing this kind of software dashboards where you can control your production process. But they also go into the cellar where they have these near-infrared spectrometers, which are also connected then through the Internet of Things with each other. And also when the real bottles in the end are transported, there is a logger logging temperature and relative humidity. So that the idea is, with this use case, that it is not just optimizing decision-making at the farm or at the vineyard or in the cellar, but also in the end, you can sell a bottle of wine and then you have a story along with it. So you can indicate how was this wine grown, where did it came from, and well, how was it treated, etc., etc. And that is where the business model also comes in. So you can do that in many different ways and at a very detailed level. So if you want to do it in a very detailed level, then you also have to pay more for a subscription of this service, because in the end it's a kind of service that this company, Process to Wine, which is one of the partners in this project, is selling. But they can also say, okay, we do it in a very basic way. And I think you're quite familiar, if you have a phone subscription, you can also have these different business models. But this is really important that they work also on this kind of business models. And this is already commercial. That's why I can show it to you, because other use cases are also working on their business model, and I'm not allowed, because they are still in a kind of confidential setting, to communicate it with you, but this is already public. Okay, finally, some use case from the dairy trial, which is called Happy Cow. Connectera was a startup in one of our previous projects, so we supported them, and they were really very successful. So in the end, they got a few million euros investment from Antera Capital, I think, a private fund. But now they're back again because they still want to further develop their product and this project. So again, they're working with the Farm Association to research, with a software provider and another institute in Finland. And this is what they're doing. They are measuring all kind of movements. So basically they have a collar around the neck of the cow with an accelerometer in it. So they measure the movements of the cow, and they are really already, because the guy that founded this company, Connectera, came from Microsoft. So they are really using already what you call artificial intelligence. So they have an advanced machine learning algorithm to measure the status of the cow, and then they can predict when it has to be inseminated. And this is, of course, from a commercial economic perspective, very, very important if you can do that in the right way. But they're also looking at other health problems and potentials. And again, here you see what they're trying to improve. So they try to improve the calving interval, the milk production, but they also are thinking about their business model. So far, some examples of IOF 2020, several use cases. So again, this is the way we are working in this iterative cycle and lean multi-actor approach. I hope this has become more clear now. And it's a 4-year project, so you see they started after 1 year, they had to have the first version of their product available, and then in the second year, the second one, and at the end, we hope, of course, that all use case can say that there is a large scale, or at least the beginning of a large scale uptake of their products and services. And of course, we started with 19, we now have 33 use cases. We think in the end, not all of them will be very successful in large scale uptake, but okay, that's also part of the innovation game. Well, we support them from a technical perspective in a work package and another work package on business support and on ecosystem development, and in this way, again, we try to build this whole ecosystem. And to just tell you a little bit, I don't know if there are people more from technology companies and that might be interested in this. And so if we look at our architecture approach, we have this use case level and then we have the whole project level. So each use case has several requirements. They build their own architecture. Some of them are based on Microsoft, other ones are on open source software or data. And, but we try to derive a kind of reference architecture so that they can also look at that and maybe improve their own architecture. But this is also something with the future in mind, that if there are new use cases after this project or outside this project, maybe also here in Turkey, then this is completely open. You can use this reference architecture to build your own architecture for your particular use case. And there will be, if you are going to implement that, you have an IoT system with IoT components. So you can also look at how can we really reuse different components. So we built a kind of IoT catalog. Then the use case is implemented. So you get all kind of example implementations that you can also reuse. So you see reuse is really the keyword over here. And in the end, you have a full system deployed where you also can think about shared services and shared data between different products. So that you really have also this collaboration space I was referring to. And then you can also think of a kind of laboratory environment that you create in which you can also start to experiment with all these different components and data and services that are in here. Of course, we don't invent it all ourselves. So here you see this previous project, but also various names of organizations maybe you are familiar with. So we don't try to invent all this from scratch, or we didn't do that. We reuse also already knowledge that was already there on standardization. And at the same time, this project is just a project, so after 4 years it ends. So we also want to sustain what is developed over here into all these different organizations, because usually these organizations are more sustainable. They are already existing, like GS1 is already existing for several decades, and it will continue. And so that's also a way in which we try to sustain our products. Now this is just a picture of the IoT catalog that we are developing. That's already live at the internet. And this is just to give an impression. I already talked about the business models. Sometimes we do also market studies. We look at the key performance indicators, and we also work on these privacy guidelines. That's what we do in what we call business support. So, okay, I hope you have now a better idea of how this multidisciplinary, collaborative, agile approach for digital transformation works. But at the same time, we're doing this now in this IOF 2020 project, and somehow after 4 years, all these use cases over here, they will end, and hopefully, of course, they will have developed some products that have a large-scale uptake. So in that sense, it will continue. But the innovation process, as we organized it now in this project IOF 2020, will stop. And that's also a pity. So that's why we say where IOF 2020 stops, Smart Agri Hubs will continue with this digital innovation process. And therefore we want to establish a EU-wide network of digital innovation hubs for digital transformation of agriculture. And here are some sub-objectives, but I think I'm taking already quite some time, so I will skip it. You can have the presentation afterwards. Let me try to explain what we mean by digital innovation hubs. It was not invented by us. It was already invented by others, and the whole Industry 4.0 movement that's also going on in Europe and worldwide. So they said, you would like to have, at a very local, regional level, hubs, which can be a group of people, institutes, that are orchestrating all these different players you see over here, which can be investors, cooperatives, governments, advisory service, startups, large companies, small companies, associations. And what they actually should do is to try to start innovation experiments which are similar to the use cases I just showed. And therefore, you need to get the different actors that you can see over here around it. You have to get them together. They need access to finance. So the hub should also organize that. And sometimes you also need very specific competences on certain technology, or maybe on business support, maybe also on ecosystem development. And then, therefore, there can be competence center within a hub, but there can also be other competence center in Europe or somewhere else in the world that you can try to connect. You can even also connect with other digital innovation hubs, because our ambition, our goal is to have 400 hubs, innovation hubs, all over Europe, so that this digital innovation process will continue at a regional level. So the idea is that the farmer or the technology provider that has a good idea can just travel not a too long distance to this hub, and then start to work on its idea, and to translate it into an innovation experiment, and to get finance and competences. So the idea is that we built this whole network of digital innovation hubs that are delivering services on ecosystem development, on technology, and on business. And here you see just a few examples. We are also just starting with this. So this is what we can think of, but maybe we will end up also with other services. So these are the 5 basic concepts. So I already explained the digital innovation hubs. We have the competence centers. The hubs are delivering certain services. So we have a kind of maturity model that can measure or assess the maturity of these different services of the digital innovation hubs, so they can also further develop their services. They're doing innovation experiments, and we are trying to connect everything together into an innovation portal, which is a website where you can, in the end, see where are the digital innovation hubs, which experiments are they doing, where are all the competence centers. So it should also facilitate this whole digital innovation process. So in the end, we have what we call a layered network of competence centers and digital innovation hubs, and we organize them also in Europe and regional clusters, because if you want to organize it in Europe as a whole, that's just too much. So we have 9 different clusters distinguished to organize these. So these are finally just some numbers. So we have already a large ecosystems of partners that are working on this. We have already established 140 digital innovation hubs in all member states. So there is at least 1 hub already in each member state of the European Union. We have these 9 regional clusters. So we want to go to 400, so add another 260. We have already 28 what we call flagship innovation experiments established. So they are kind of example also for future innovation experiments, because as you can see over here, we want to have, at least during the project, 70 new innovation experiments added, and maybe more. And we do that also through open calls. So we will have an open call of 6 million euros also available, so that we can attract also new innovation experiments. But actually, we also want to top up or multiply the 6 million with additional funding mobilized from other sources. Can be public funding, can be private funding. So we really want to do this matchmaking. So that in the end, we have also replication of all kind of innovation experiments throughout Europe, and also maybe at a global level. And that's also where I want to invite you to join this movement of digital innovation hubs, to see if you can also establish that over here. So to come to a conclusion, I think I try to indicate that the whole agri-food production is becoming more technology and more data-driven, and I think we're just at the beginning. There's more to come. But it's not only about technology. There's a lot about what I call governance and business modeling issues, and that it creates maybe also major shifts in roles and power relations between different players, existing players and new players come in the whole food chain. And I hope that you remember that one. My main message was that you need a multidisciplinary, collaborative and agile approach in which governance and business models are key issues, and that there is also a need for an open facilitating infrastructure. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you for your attention.